Hello everyone, Ewan here, and well, I know Spider-Man Far From Home has just come and gone, but it's time to talk about the third film. Perhaps more than anyone predicted it would, Spider-Man Far From Home promises huge things for the future of the MCU. Not so much in the film itself, but in its post-credits scenes, which set up the inevitable sequel and even what Nick Fury is getting up to in Phase 4. Fortunately, we actually know a fair bit about the MCU's third Spider-Man film, at least production-wise. Far From Home provided the narrative foundations for the threequel, and with plenty of theories still to come, plus other MCU films that may hint at what's in store for Spidey, it's likely still that more details will emerge by the end of the month. Be that as it may, details regarding Spider-Man 3, or Spider-Man Homeboy, or Spider-Man Homeward Bound, or whatever you want to call it, aren't as scarce as fans may think. Given what we saw in Far From Home and clues given by the cast and crew before its release, here's everything we know so far about the upcoming film. Major spoilers ahead, of course. Number 11, it'll be Peter's final year in high school. Tom Holland loves a good spoiler, so much so that we've seen Marvel capitalize on his reputation to reveal specific details regarding their films. Be that as it may, it's unclear if the studio wanted this specific detail out in the open, with Holland having spilled the beans a while back that his Spider-Man films would be almost like a, quote, high school trilogy. Speaking to Screen Rant on the set of Spider-Man Homecoming, Holland was queried regarding his earlier comments that the Harry Potter films were a perfect example of what these new Spider-Man movies could achieve. As those familiar with the Potter franchise will attest, those films followed the eponymous wizard through each year of his time in Hogwarts, all the way up until his final year at the school. Given Far From Home picks up Peter as he commences the 11th grade, that would leave him with one final year of high school in the final film. Holland confirmed that it would be the, quote, formula Marvel would take with Spidey's films, which pretty much confirms the untitled threequel will follow Peter through to graduation. Just as long as he navigates that ending reveal, of course. Number 10, Jon Watts is likely to direct. Jon Watts directed both Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home, and it seems pretty much like a given that he'll return for the threequel whenever it starts production. The director was reluctant to give a definite answer when asked about the prospect of returning for the third film before Far From Home's release, but it makes too much sense for him not to. Watts has delivered back-to-back successes in Homecoming and now Far From Home too, and given how the sequel ends, there's no point in handing things to a different director to finish Peter's first arc in the MCU. Speaking to Screen Rant again, Watts admitted that he still isn't sure how the trilogy will end. That at least indicates he's already thinking about it though, and while the director does state that he tries to, quote, think about it one movie at a time, it seems a given at this stage that he'll return. Number 9, and he wants Kraven to be in it. It might be another couple of years until Spider-Man 3 hits theaters, but Jon Watts already has a figure in mind who he'd like to be the villain, but only if it were, quote, completely up to him. Speaking to Uproxx, the Far From Home director said that he would love to have Kraven the Hunter in the next film, before following that up with a question of how exactly you would do Kraven in a movie. And to be honest, Kraven would actually make a lot of sense, given how Far From Home ends. He's a hunter plain and simple, and one would imagine there'd be a sizable bounty on Peter Parker's head now that his secret is out in the open. That's the perfect opportunity to introduce Kraven, although there may be a spanner in the works too. It was revealed just the other year that Sony are planning to make a Kraven solo movie to form a part of their, quote, universe of Marvel characters. Still doesn't roll off the tongue, but anyway, introducing him in the third Spidey film would undoubtedly impact those plans, so it might be a case of wishful thinking for now, even if Kraven would be amazing to see in the MCU. Number 8, it's probably going to release in 2021. Seeing as how Spider-Man Homecoming released in 2017 and Far From Home released in 2019, it seems a given that the third film will follow suit and release 2 years from now in 2021. No other MCU series has retained this kind of consistency, with other sequels releasing irregularly since 2008. In Spidey's case though, it seems as though Sony are keen to make this incarnation of the character a regular event, which will also no doubt see them extend terms with Marvel so that both companies may continue to use the character going forward. It's a mutually beneficial relationship, and given the MCU will see Shang-Chi, Black Widow, and the Eternals released beforehand, Marvel fans will still have a lot on their plate until the web-slinger's next adventure. Number 7, Spidey's identity is out in the open. By far the biggest bombshell dropped by Far From Home came in the post-credits, where it was revealed that Mysterio had masterminded a fake video framing Spider-Man as the mastermind behind the attack on London. Said video is released to the public by the Daily Bugle, more on that in a second, but the main point to consider here is that Spider-Man's secret identity is no longer secret, and that's a huge thing the next film will have to deal with, for better or for worse. The MCU has reiterated time and again that it's not so fond of secret identities, but Spidey's is sort of integral to the character. Without it, his family and loved ones are all in danger, and it seems as though the third film will put them all in the firing line from start to finish. It's a massive twist, and one that's sure to spark debate between Spidey fans in the weeks to come. However, putting said debate to one side just for a second, it's really interesting to consider just how the third film will play out with this new dynamic in mind. Originally, many thought this would just literally be Spider-Man in his final year of high school, but now he's pretty much a fugitive too. If he's not, then at least the city will be up against him, and it remains to be seen who might come to his aid. Number 6, and J. Jonah Jameson is going to be an influence. J.K. Simmons' return to the character of J. Jonah Jameson is the stuff dreams are made of. JJ and the Bugle's rebrand as an InfoWars-esque cesspool falls in line with what fans saw in last year's Spider-Man game, only the stakes are much higher this time around. With Peter's identity out in the public, it remains to be seen whether Marvel will be able to put the genie back in the bottle, or if this is genuinely the status quo from now on. Either way, we can expect Jameson to be much more than a cameo. Far From Home's commentary on the declining value of experts in political discourse was really fascinating to consider, and it looks as though the follow-up is about to take one step further with a look at fake news and how technology can influence public opinion for the worse. Who better to represent that than JJ? Number 5, Vulture and Scorpion will probably appear. Viewers may have been slightly disappointed that Far From Home didn't pick up on the end credits sequence from its immediate predecessor, but that doesn't mean Michael Keaton's Vulture and Michael Mando's Scorpion are off the cards just yet. Both villains are sure to re-emerge later down the line, and it makes even more sense for the latter to do so now that Jameson's involved. Putting on my comics editor glasses just for 1 second, in the comics, it was Jameson who effectively created the Scorpion to take down Spider-Man, and while we still don't know the level of resources he's working with here, it wouldn't be out of the question for Matt Gargan to get involved via JJ's hand. Likewise, even though Vulture illustrated a respect for Peter by not giving away his identity in prison, could it be the case that his resolve gets tested by Jameson, or another well-backed shadowy figure? Only time will tell. Number 4, and maybe even Mysterio too. Far From Home included a subtle tease regarding Mysterio that not too many have actually dwelled on. I mean, justifiably of course, given the gravity of both post-credit sequences, but it's worth discussing all the same. After Beck's death on Tower Bridge, his associate William Ginter Reaver downloads the remaining Mysterio software and what looks to be around 500 or so drones. Now, this could confirm that William himself was behind the ending footage, and it could also even potentially hint that Mysterio will, like he was in the comics, be a legacy villain of sorts. It wasn't just Beck who donned the identity in the source material, and although William was included as a neat throwback to the first Iron Man film, it might be wise to expect him, or at the very least the Mysterio identity, to play some sort of role in Spider-Man 3. Number 3, Norman Osborn is rumored to appear. For a while now, Norman Osborn has been heavily rumored to appear in MCU Phase 4. Online chatter seems to indicate that Marvel want the Oscorp head to be that particular phase's big bad, only not in the Green Goblin persona most know him by. This actually makes a great deal of sense. After all, Norman has actually been depicted as an antagonist for the Avengers more than he has Spider-Man over the last 2 decades, and while that hasn't been so much as a hint of the Osborns in the MCU, neither Harry nor Norman, it wouldn't be too difficult to allude to their presence in the next feature. They could be the shadowy villains pulling the strings behind the scenes, or Marvel could even save them for a later film. Either way, given the sheer volume of discourse that has hinted at Norman appearing in the future, it seems likely that he could make his full MCU bow in the next Spider-Man film, especially so if you think that building at the end of Far From Home is actually Oscorp and not the Baxter Building. Number 2, Marvel will be able to use the Netflix characters. While the MCU continues to reach new heights year on year with its cinematic outings, the story has sadly been the opposite when it comes to things on the small screen. Although Daredevil was literally the best thing, the story with the other Netflix shows wasn't as consistent. Still, even though that was the case, fans are still desperate to see the likes of Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and yes, even Iron Fist on the big screen, but especially The Man Without Fear. MCU Cosmic have even gone so far as to suggest that Far From Home's likely 2021 release could see the return of Charlie Cox's Daredevil, with that also being the year Marvel will be able to start using The Man Without Fear again on the big and small screens. Matt Murdock and Peter Parker are pretty synonymous with each other in the comics, and given how Spidey might be in need of a lawyer, it would make sense for the Avocados at law to pay him a visit. And come on, who doesn't want to see this team up happen? And number 1, Sony wants Tom Hardy's Venom to appear. How this will actually happen given Far From Home's ending is unclear, but word from Roger Wardell, the Twitter user who accurately leaked Avengers Endgame's Fat Thor, among other things, is that Sony, quote, desperately wants Tom Hardy's Venom in the third Spider-Man film. He repudiates rumors that Deadpool may appear, but it seems like Venom has a genuine chance of actually making it in. Of course, fans may remember how, in the build-up to Venom's release, there were rumors circulating that Tom Holland had recorded a cameo. Sony have always maintained that their spin-off was MCU adjacent, but Marvel have always been less eager to confirm ties. Given Venom grows such an ungodly summer, however, one would imagine they're about ready to change their minds. It would be an ambitious task getting Venom into Spider-Man 3, especially since the character's solo film teased up a confrontation with Woody Harrelson's Carnage, but Spidey fans will be the first to tell you that Eddie Brock has baggage with the Bugle. He worked for a rival publication in the comics, and there's a definite chance he could move back to New York to take on J. Jonah Jameson, purely in a journalistic sense, of course. Despite Wardell's credibility, it's important to bear in mind that this isn't confirmation that Tom's Holland and Hardy will be sharing the screen in the near future. Holland has, of course, gone on record saying how much he'd like to see Venom and Spider-Man share the screen, but it's ultimately up to Marvel and Sony to thrash something out in time for 2021. Here's hoping they found a way to knock let the devil in time for then. I want to know what you think it's going to be called down in the comments below, because let's face it, you're going to have a better title for it than I do anyway. Be sure to drop us a like and a subscribe, and head back on over to whatculture.com for more lists and articles like this every day. As always, I've been Ewan. Catch me on Twitter at HumanRuinsThings, and I'll see you next time. Bye!